I discovered my daughter-in-law hidden in a chicken coop. What happened next was incredible. Frank wiped the sweat from his brow, squinting against the afternoon sun, the air thick with the scent of hay and the earthy musk of the barn. The world around him pulsed with life, yet he felt stifled, entrenched in the same worn routines. He stepped towards the chicken coop, thoughts spiraling into an unruly chaos. What would his father say if he found out about Molly's rumors? The girl wasn't one for the lamb. She was always drawn to something else, something that unsettled the very fabric of their farming legacy. As he approached the coop, he heard a faint rustle. With an instinctive twinge of worry, he pushed the door open, and there she was, Molly, hunched low among the bales of hay, a complete picture of surprise. Panic seized Frank in an icy grip. What was she doing here, hiding away from responsibility? Hadn't she always been the one to challenge everything they stood for? Molly? He called out, voice low. What in the world are you doing? To his astonishment, a vibrant spark lit her eyes. I'm working on something important, Frank, she declared, excitement palpable in her voice. She lifted a handwritten manuscript, crumpled from secrecy but brimming with energy. I want to write a children's book about our farm, about the chickens, the cows, what it means to live in a place like this. Frank stared, struggling to process her words. A million questions boiled beneath the surface. This wasn't working the land, wasn't carrying on the family legacy. He pictured his father's frown, one that filled him with dread, fueled by the community's traditional values. Their world was built on hard work, not whimsy and fancy tales of imagination. Listen, Molly, he said slowly, tension lining his voice. This isn't just some hobby. You're talking about something entirely different here. What about the farm? What about your responsibilities? She bristled, a shadow crossing her face. But isn't it all connected? These stories are about us, who we are. Can't you see? At that moment, he felt it, the weight of decision pressing on him like a tethered anchor. On one side, there was the unyielding duty to uphold his family's legacy, and on the other, a glimmer of hope that his daughter-in-law could forge a new path. Could nurturing this wild idea risk everything they had built? The whispers of the town echoed in his ears. I could almost see their judgment, the way they'd shake their heads in disbelief, the silent disdain for Molly's unconventional dreams. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference.
Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the manuscript trembled in her hands, anger and desperation swirled in Frank's chest, a familiar ache that clouded his judgment. Shouldn't he be protecting her, standing his ground against danger? Yet beneath that frustration lay a deeper yearning to understand, to connect. He caught glimpses of the light she carried with her, and it frightened him. What if pursuing her passion introduced cracks in their foundation? Suddenly, the impending pressure felt unbearable. A thought flared in his mind. What if she succeeds? The fragile harmony of their lives hinged on his approval, now tugged in two different directions. In that moment, it hit him. Molly's dreams, though unfathomable, held a power that contradicted his beliefs and challenged everything he was. Caught in a web of tormenting choices, Frank inhaled sharply, staring at Molly as her determination darkened the space between them. Could he sacrifice the admirable tradition for something unknown, something more expansive than he had the courage to embrace? As the questions spiraled faster, he felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, leaving him wrestling with an urgency that was becoming impossible to ignore. The moments stretched on, heavy with silence, leading him unerringly toward a truth he wasn't prepared to face. Frank's thoughts raced like wildfire, consuming every shred of clarity he had. If he somehow discouraged Molly, would he forever be the barrier between her aspirations and their reality? Yet the thought of his father's legacy cracking under the weight of fiction the vice around his heart. He had spent years ensuring the farm thrived, fighting battles in the fields, and watching his family's traditions flourish. Would he now be the one to cut the roots that had sustained them for generations? With a determined face, Molly took a step closer, her manuscript brushing against the tips of his fingers, delicate and fragile. "This isn't just a story, Frank," she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of passion and insistence. "It's our story. It's the heart of who you are as a farmer and of what this place represents. Isn't there something in you that wants to share that? Let the world know about the magic of our life here?"
Her words struck a chord he wasn't ready to acknowledge, stirring feelings of both fear and intrigue. Was there a magic in the dirt under his nails, in the cluck of a chicken, or the rhythm of the seasons? Had he become so entrapped in the grind of responsibilities that he had lost sight of the beauty in their everyday lives? The prospect of storytelling tugged at him like a thread being pulled from a tightly woven tapestry. "All I've ever wanted," he began, fighting against the tremor in his voice, "was to keep this farm running, to provide a life that you and my son can be proud of."
"How can we do that if you're off chasing fantasies?" His heartbeat echoed the uncertainty lacing his sentiments, betraying the protective facade he attempted to present. Molly's expression softened, yet her resolve remained strong. "But there is a chance for both. I could write these stories and we can still grow and manage this farm. Wouldn't it be possible to inspire others by what we do, instead of following an old path that stifles us?" Frank shifted uncomfortably, contemplating the myriad dynamics at play. Could his fear of change outweigh the pull of possibility? The world beyond their farm was growing richer, and he felt himself grappling with a notion he had long dismissed. Change could offer a new landscape, a fresh narrative to their history. Molly's ambitions were, in some abstract way, an extension of his own legacy. Yet, what if it all fell apart? Would he be the cause of it? He held the manuscript now, his fingertips grazing over the paper as if searching for clarity. "What if it doesn't work?" he whispered, the vulnerability of his own doubt laying bare with each syllable. Molly met his gaze, unyielding and warm. "Then we learn from it, and we try again. Isn't that how life on the farm has always been? Learning through the unpredictable seasons and weathering the storms together?" The walls he'd built around himself felt like they were beginning to crack. Perhaps fearing the unknown was more damaging than embracing it. A part of him longed for the freedom Molly spoke of, a kind of liberation he had never anticipated. As the sun sank lower in the sky, casting shadows across the barn floor, Frank found himself at a crossroads, between the weight of tradition and the spark of creation. He realized that the real challenge wasn't simply the fear of failure, but also the realization of uncharted potential. What if this leap toward the unknown unlocked more than just stories? Could it breathe new life into his own existence? The doubt loomed heavy, facilitating a strange urge to leap beyond the precipice of routine. With newfound determination flickering within him, Frank finally spoke, each word a careful step into possibility. "Let's explore it then, together. But it needs to be a partnership, a way to merge the old with the new." Molly's eyes sparkled with a mix of relief and excitement, and a small smile broke through her previous trepidation. Frank sensed a shift, a renaissance lurking just out of reach, beckoning him into its embrace. Could this endeavor truly redefine their family legacy? As they stood together, the flickering light from the setting sun danced around them, illuminating the path forward. Yet as they both leaned into this new journey, something loomed at the horizon, a challenge that would test their resolve in ways they never imagined. What awaited them beyond this tentative step toward a shared dream? The following days found Frank engaged in an internal dialogue that turned each routine morning into a wrestling match with his anxieties. He would awaken at the usual hour, the alarm cutting through the early silence like a harbinger of responsibility, but he felt a discord between the rhythm of the morning chores and the burgeoning ideas spinning in his mind. The farm, once a sanctuary of solace, transformed into a landscape painted with questions instead of certainty. As he slipped into his boots and stepped out into the crisp dawn, the earthy scent of soil mingled with the sweet notes of hay, yet each breath felt laced with the weight of impending choices. He glanced over at the fields where his father had toiled, visions of sun-soaked generations echoing in his mind. But now, alongside those historic images, the flicker of Molly's aspirations ignited a new landscape, one filled with potential stories waiting to unfold. What kind of narratives could emerge from the cornstalks swaying softly in the breeze, or the laughter shared over dinner? His heart raced at the thought, but equally daunting was the tightening coil of fear that threatened to paralyze him. Pushing his worries aside, he approached the chicken coop. The familiar cluck of hens and the soft rustle of feathers gave him an odd sense of tranquility, juxtaposed against the tumultuous thoughts swirling inside his mind. Yet today there was an unusual presence coming from the coop, an energy he hadn't noticed before. "Frank, can you help me?"
Molly's voice sliced through his reverie, filled with urgency and a tinge of mischief. He turned to find her crouched next to the coop, her face smeared with dust from bending too close to the dirt. "What is it?" he asked, both intrigued and alarmed. "Look," she pointed eagerly. "This hen has laid something unusual." With a furrowed brow, Frank bent to inspect the area she indicated, and there it was, a speckled egg unlike the others, reflecting the sunlight with iridescence that almost seemed otherworldly. His heart skipped a beat, and for a moment time stood still as the egg symbolized more than just a natural occurrence. It echoed the beginnings of something new, a potential. "This means something, doesn't it?" Molly insisted, her eyes brightening with the prospect. "It feels special, just like our new journey." Frank's mind raced, sensing the implications of her words. This moment resembled their budding partnership, a unique opportunity emerging from where tradition had once stood unyielding. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his curiosity piquing. "What if we write about the magic of everyday moments here on the farm? Start with this egg. Document what it entails, how it's part of the cycle of life and our story. I could weave the narrative around our routines, and we could share it with others." Apprehension battled with fascination in Frank's heart. He opened his mouth to voice his concerns. Surely there were larger matters at hand than a magical egg. But something about her genuine excitement made him reconsider. "This could be our first story," he found himself saying, the words tumbling forth like the hatchlings soon to emerge from their warm shells. Molly grabbed his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Yes, a story that shows our struggles, our victories, and everything in between. Let it reflect not just our current existence, but also the flicker of possibility ahead." For the first time, Frank felt a spark igniting inside him. Perhaps this was more than just a leap into the unknown. It could cultivate their bond and strengthen the very ties of their family legacy. But as he opened his eyes further to this new vision, doubt quickly crept back in. Could the world really be transformed by their experiences? Could they genuinely share their story without unraveling the fabric of tradition? Silence hung between them, thick with anticipation. Frank could feel a multitude of emotions swirling within him, but one question rose above the rest, leaving an uncomfortable knot in his stomach. What would happen when the world outside their green fields perceived their stories? Would it nurture their growth, or would it ultimately lead to unforeseen challenges that could threaten everything they had built? Just as he felt the urgency peak, a rustle in the bushes caught his attention, breaking the momentary reverie. Something was moving in the shadows, lurking, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it might not be merely the farm's secrets rustling. Frank's heart raced, the tension spiraling as he realized their quiet adventure may soon confront an unexpected adversary. What awaited him beyond the threshold of their newfound dream? Frank's instincts kicked in as he shifted his attention from Molly's excitement to the movement lurking in the shadows. His heart pounded, amplifying the tension that had already been coiling inside him. What dangers lay hidden out there, possibly threatening the very first steps of their dream? "Molly, stay back," he whispered urgently, the parental protective instinct surfacing as he edged closer to the bushes, squinting into the dim light. The anticipation of what could emerge sent a cold rush down his spine. He steeled himself, balancing between vigilance and the urge to maintain the magic of their moment. With a decisive push, he moved past the greenery. What he revealed was not the feared adversary, but rather a small black cat, its green eyes shimmering with curiosity. "Just a cat," he breathed out, relief washing over him. But the sense of unease didn't dissipate. It only bubbled deeper within him, manifesting itself as a need to confront not just the unexpected presence, but the shifting ground beneath their feet. "Look at it, Frank," Molly exclaimed, her earlier enthusiasm sliding back into focus as she knelt beside the new creature. "It's beautiful."
Should we keep it? His thoughts darted between practicality and fantasy. Life was full of decisions, and this moment was no different. As they scooped the cat into Molly's eager arms, Frank felt an inkling of insight igniting the confusion inside him. Should they embrace these surprises, these little changes, as they embarked on this narrative journey? Could this be a metaphor for the unpredictability of their upcoming adventure? The warmth in Molly's eyes was undeniable as she cradled the cat. Maybe it could strengthen their burgeoning story, add liveliness to the daily routine, intertwining their new narrative with a sense of unpredictability. But as Frank reflected on the broader implications, doubt loomed once more. Each addition seemed to deepen his uncertainty about the scope of their ambition. Would a singular patch of space, both literal and metaphorical, be enough to contain their ideas without overwhelming their lives? Days passed, and they started documenting their lives on the farm, Sunsets, the sows giving birth, special moments shared over dinner. Yet every piece they shaped from their experiences became intertwined with the cat's antics, the egg's potential, and most significantly, traditions that had ensured the family's survival for decades. Frank found himself scraping the surface of his creative side, opening avenues of thought he had previously shied away from. He discovered a latent ability to articulate struggles folded within his legacy. Piece by piece, the narrative began to emerge like a puzzle falling into place. Yet he still felt haunted by the specter of failure, feeling too vulnerable to think that what they were creating could be accepted by a world that oftentimes seemed indifferent. As one evening cast a golden hue across the farm, they sat on the porch with pad and pencil, weighed down by an unspoken question. Frank's eyes glanced across the fields, seeking clarity amid the uncertainties of their shared path. The tension of taking a leap into the unknown pulsed through him, stronger than ever. "Frank," Molly nudged gently, her gaze unwavering as if sensing his internal struggle. "What if our story isn't just ours? What if it tells a greater truth about family, about nurturing bonds despite changes? I feel like this is bigger than us." Her words opened a floodgate of realizations for Frank. This was no longer simply about preserving tradition. It was about evolving it to foster growth while still honoring where they came from. The idea of their narrative flowing beyond just their lives struck a powerful chord within him, illuminating shades of purpose. But with that illumination came an urgent question. How much of their story would they be willing to share with the outside world? What if the chains of tradition forged by the generations before him weren't just a safety net, but also a shackle that could hinder the very growth they yearned for?
Lost in thought, he regarded the horizon, knowing somewhere out there lay an unpredictable journey ahead. Expectation battled fear in his mind, leaving him with one chilling notion. The time had come to face the world outside their sanctuary. Would they embrace it, or would it send their dreams shattering into the dust? As the sun set, casting long shadows across their lives, Frank realized the moment of truth approached, one that would determine not just the direction of their narrative, but the foundations of every tradition he'd come to know. With determination sprouting within him, he breathed deep, searching for the courage to face not just the challenges ahead, but the truths he had hidden even from himself. The question lingered heavily in the air. Could he reevaluate what it meant to truly nurture their legacy? Or would it always feel like they were walking a tightrope above uncertainty? With the horizon swallowing the last shards of daylight, Frank sat on the porch, his palms resting on the pad and pencil that had become both his refuge and his battleground. Echoes of Molly's voice haunted him, the weight of her inquiries pressing deeper into his bones. As dusk settled, he found himself grappling with not just their narrative, but the very essence of their existence. What was he really afraid of? The world outside felt like a vast expanse of uncertainty, and yet within it lay opportunity, raw and unfiltered. Engaging in this endeavor was more than mere storytelling. It was an act of bravery. Each moment he hesitated compounded the reality that stayed embedded deep within him. What if they failed? What if the traditions he feared losing were indeed the very anchors of their dreams? In this spiraling thought, he was startled as a soft caw emanated from the coop, reminding him of the fragile connections tied to their farm life. Taking a deep breath, he walked towards the source of the sound, the moonlight guiding his steps. Each stride served as an affirmation, an embodiment of his resolve to confront not just the outside world, but the inner turmoil that threatened to choke him. Peering into the coop, he found an amalgamation of feathers and gentle clucks. Yet amidst them, he saw the little black cat, still innocent, still curious, entwined among the hens. A snapshot of harmonious chaos. Tilting his head in contemplation, Frank suddenly felt a flicker of inspiration. Perhaps the cat represented the unpredictable aspects he had been so focused on avoiding. It was a symbol of embracing life's interruptions, a lesson in adaptability. Each chicken, he realized, was a story waiting to be told, a life filled with significance. He could translate that sentiment into something bigger, metaphors stemming from their existence, lessons about resilience, growth, and the journey. As he turned away from the coop, mind racing with possibilities, he caught sight of Molly, leaning against the porch railing, eyes shimmering with the light of the moon, echoing the cat's essence. "Frank," she broke the silence, her voice laced with uncertainty, "what if we opened up our story to others?
What if we let them see our struggles, our successes? Her words struck a chord. They'd spent weeks hesitating, cocooned in a bubble of self-doubt. But what if this exposure was necessary? The impending decisions of sharing their lives, reflections of authenticity that could inspire others, flitted through his mind. He could almost taste the challenge. Are you suggesting we document everything? The good, the bad, the messy? Frank questioned, a tremor of hesitation lacing his tone. Yes, let them see the entire ecosystem of our lives here, she replied, her voice emboldened with belief. It's messy, just like raising kids or running a farm, but it's real. He felt an unfamiliar charge of excitement coursing through him. The idea bloomed like spring flowers breaking through winter's frost. Could they really bridge that gap? Invite others into their lives, flaws and all? Yet lurking beneath the excitement was trepidation. What if they were met with scorn or dismissal? But a new thought emerged to challenge that fear. Their story, an intersection of mundane moments, growth, and inevitable obstacles, could transform lives, connecting with readers who might desperately need inspiration to embrace imperfections. Moreover, in sharing, he might be releasing not only his burdens, but encouraging Molly to flourish in her creative confidence. Molly's face shone with anticipation, drawing him back from the precipice of despair. Together, he realized, they could begin crafting a new legacy, one that did not suppress their past, but built upon its foundation, manifesting tradition with modern courage. While they stood together beneath the starlit sky, the air filled with newfound resolve, a decisive question lingered. How would they share their story with the world? What format would do justice to everything they wished to convey? In that moment, enveloped by darkness yet filled with possibility, Frank understood the contours of their next leap. The time had come to not only record their wondrous adventure, but embolden them both to step beyond their comfort zone. As they turned back toward the house, ready to put plans into motion, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to shift irreversibly. Would this new openness unearth something within him that he hadn't yet discovered? With every step, driven by possibility and uncertainty alike, Frank could only wonder, what truths would they unveil as they challenged the narratives of their lives, and could those truths reshape not just their story, but ultimately themselves? The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the swirling doubts that still loomed in Frank's mind.
He had awoken early, the sun just a whisper on the horizon, urging him to put pen to paper. He paced the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee cutting through the remnants of sleep, his thoughts a cacophony of ideas and anxieties. This was not just about sharing their story, he reminded himself. It was about documenting their journey, the highs and lows as real as the land beneath his feet. But how to articulate that? Navigating the dual spectrums of vulnerability and authenticity felt like an uncharted territory. He felt the tremors of trepidation shake his resolve, but an emerging determination stifled those fears. Molly joined him, her enthusiasm an electric current. "Have you started?" she asked, her eyes bright with expectation. The energy radiating off her seemed to promise that perhaps they could really do this. "I've been thinking about starting with the chickens," Frank blurted out, surprising himself. They're chaotic, but grounded. They have their own stories." "Exactly. You can weave their lives into what we're experiencing," she encouraged, already envisioning the potential. "What about a blog? We could offer readers raw insight into our everyday life." Frank hesitated. A blog? The world was noisy and judgmental, full of critics ready to dismiss the work of the vulnerable. But the notion hung in the air, tantalizing and sweet, like the scent of blooming wildflowers. He leaned back against the counter, contemplating. But what if nobody reads it? What if we lay ourselves bare and it falls flat? Or what if it resonates with someone? She countered, unwavering. Usually the best echo is found in our truth. He felt a flicker of conviction light in his chest at her words. Did he have something significant to share? Could he afford to reveal the rawness of their lives, imperfections and all? That's just it. What we see as ordinary, others might not. The chaos of the chicken coop, it's a microcosm of life. Both the mundane and the extraordinary coexist, and they shape who we are, he articulated slowly, piecing together the philosophy emerging from behind his self-doubt. With a newfound clarity, Frank began to jot down notes about each chicken, their quirks, frightened moments, and the way they thrived against all odds. He even started drafting a brief introduction about their lives on the farm, the hardships and joys entwined. A sense of purpose ignited within him, one he hadn't anticipated. Maybe it's not just about the chickens, he mused, a revelation dawning on him. It's about our connection to this land and each other, our ability to embrace the chaos. Molly nodded approvingly, her support tangible. And it'll show how we're growing through it all. How will we evolve the narrative? The weight lifted a bit, but Frank's hands still trembled with a combination of anxiety and excitement as he began to write his first post. Hours melted away as the words flowed, each sentence an exploration into their world. The act of documenting became a protest against the fear threatening to paralyze him. Yet, as he poured out his thoughts, an uncomfortable realization slinked into his mind. With this exploration came accountability. How would they respond to negative feedback? How would they maintain their dignity in the face of adversity? Those questions hung heavy in the air, threatening to suffocate his resolve. Despite the excitement, surely there existed the potential for ridicule. What if their vulnerability became fodder for scorn? And even as he settled into this new venture that felt both liberating and daunting, a tense awareness gripped his thoughts. In stepping toward this new chapter, they were unwittingly pushing open doors that could lead to unforeseen consequences. The adrenaline surged within him as he thought of the potential conflicts lying just beyond the threshold. No longer was this just about sharing moments. It would demand courage, resilience, and a reckoning with themselves. As the day began to blur into evening, seated on the porch again, pen poised, Frank took a deep breath. He felt the weight of the impending journey looming on the horizon, shimmering like a mirage. What truths lay just beyond their story? Would they forge deeper connections or uncover unexpected struggles as they bared their lives to the world? Frank rose early the next morning, the optimism of the previous day juxtaposed against a fresh wave of trepidation. The sun's light seeped through the crack in the curtains, casting an unsettling warmth over the kitchen counter, where his unfinished notes lay scattered. Doubt loomed, as heavy as darkness before dawn, and competition with those voices in his head felt more relentless than ever. He thought back to the vibrant conversations with Molly. She had sparkled with passion, yet in the stark solitude of dawn, her excitement became a reminder of his fear. What if his efforts were futile? Perhaps he wasn't equipped to share their story after all. Was his writing just a hollow echo of someone else's real journey? Molly entered, her bright demeanor torn between enthusiasm and sympathy as she noticed Frank's furrowed brow. "What's the matter? You look like you've seen a ghost," she teased lightly, but the concern underlying her words betrayed the sentiment. "I'm considering everything I wrote yesterday," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Are we truly ready for this? What if we're exposing ourselves further than necessary?" Molly stepped closer, leaning against the counter, her eyes locking onto his. "This isn't just about our lives. It's about the lessons embedded in our experiences. We can't predict who we will become as we share this. That, Frank, is the beauty of the unknown." Her conviction struck a chord within him, yet insecurity twisted in his gut. Writing felt like a commitment, not just to his narrative, but to the world that would form opinions based on it. He scrutinized the thoughts swirling within his mind. The balance between authenticity and self-preservation was uncertain, and he was terrified of the consequences. "Think about it," she continued. "Maybe our story is a way to evolve. What if this leads to something greater, something we can't see yet?" "There's so much at stake," he muttered, barely believing his own words. "We could uncover things about ourselves we're not prepared to face. Or we could find strength we didn't know we had," Molly countered, her certainty an anchor in his turbulent seas of thought. This confrontation, his own hesitations battling against her unwavering support, ignited something inside him. For the first time, the fear morphed into excitement. That raw unknown that felt so frightening might be the very thing that would empower him. "Okay then," he affirmed, his voice stronger. "I'll move forward. I want to explore those fears, confront my hesitations, and see where this journey leads.
It's time to wrestle with the discomfort. With renewed determination, Frank returned to the paper. Each word felt like a small victory. He crafted a post about the chaotic routine of the chickens, threading in moments that revealed their true nature. Yet alongside the struggle of his narrative came a deeper, more personal dilemma. What would it mean to share his mistakes, his failures, and the moments that had carved him? The act of writing became not just a chore, but a battleground. He was about to unveil parts of himself he had hidden away for so long. As he wrote of the chickens' chaos, he began to draw parallels between their journey and his own. The horrors and the beauty of growth shaped both realms. There was a narrative rhythm weaving itself together, a melody of courage against fear. But the closer he examined this new vulnerability, the more pressing his realization became. Would anyone sympathize with a minor detail of their lives, or would spectators brand him a fool for airing their struggles so openly? As the hours slipped by, shadows deepened across the fields, whispers of dusk wrapping around him like a cloak of uncertainty. He leaned back, exhausted, yet invigorated by the confrontation he had just endured. His hand hovered above the next sentence, ready to pen a new thought, when Molly appeared again, the evening light radiating around her as if framing a new chapter. "Ready to take it public?" she asked, tipping her head with a knowing smile. The question hung in the air, potent and challenging. Frank's heart raced. Was he really ready for the sleep? As he pondered, a new wave of disbelief washed over him. What if sharing their journey became the catalyst for not just personal growth, but a profound connection with others? Just as he opened his mouth to respond, the faint sound of clucking echoed from the coop, a chorus beckoning him toward his destiny, pulling thread after thread of courage from his soul. With resolve brewing in his chest, he realized that stepping into the unknown wasn't just about facing ridicule. It was the strength of claiming their truth that made the journey worthwhile. Little did he know that simmering just below the surface was a revelation waiting to unfurl, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about connection and accountability. Would he uncover that truth before it was too late? As Frank mulled over Molly's question, the gravity of the moment settled into the pit of his stomach. Taking it public wasn't just a casual step. It felt like a leap from the safety of solid ground into a swirling abyss where he had to confront the true nature of his thoughts and feelings. Could he withstand the scrutiny? Would their story resonate, or would it fall on apathetic ears? In the low light of the kitchen, with shadows creeping across the walls, Frank gathered the scattered papers. Each scribbled note contained threads of vulnerability he wasn't sure he was ready to weave together for a wider audience. The clucking of the hens outside seemed to beckon him. They embodied a raw, unfiltered existence that Frank envied. Their lives unfolded without the weight of self-doubt, and their constant, chaotic movement mirrored his own turbulent thoughts. "Can we share the chickens? Can we share our lessons?" he asked himself, hovering over the words like they were hot coals. Each letter demanded not just articulation, but also a piece of his essence. Would his imperfections be his strength or his downfall? Molly stepped closer, reading the hesitations sketched across his brow. "I believe in every word you write. You have a gift, Frank. Don't let fear subdue your voice." Her encouragement, steady and unyielding, ignited something deeper, a flicker of determination that began to grow. Emboldened by her belief, he picked up his pen again and wrote about a particularly chaotic day with the chickens. As he described their unpredictable nature, he also turned the lens inward, revealing moments of his own life. He detailed how he'd often felt as disorganized as those feathered creatures, battling insecurities that left him feeling exposed and weary. Suddenly, an idea crystallized within him. This was more than just reflections on the chickens. They were allegories of self-discovery and resilience. Every struggle he penned mirrored their own, and perhaps, through this parallel, he could offer something valuable to those who read. A sense of belonging, a flicker of hope, a voice for those who felt unheard. The more he wrote, the more clarity emerged. Who he was and the convoluted journey he'd traversed started to unfold organically.
He found healing in admitting how far he had fallen and how he managed to rise, just like the sun that floated over the horizon every day, relentless in its return. Yet as sweeping as this revelation felt, the shadow of doubt lurked nearby. What about the moments that weren't so pretty, the utter failures and missteps? Would they be met with the same empathy he hoped to convey? Frank's heart pounded as he confronted this renewed fear. "Is this where I draw the line?" he whispered to himself, the question echoing through the quiet space. He was faced with a moral dilemma. Would he share the full spectrum of his journey or shield himself from potential hurt? Molly's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts. "It's okay to feel scared, Frank. Just remember, vulnerability is a strength. It connects us." Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket, nudging him toward a decision. He pulled out more paper and began to write fervently, pouring not just the chaos of the chickens into his prose, but the chaos within him too, the mistakes, the harsh realities, and ultimately the lessons learned. He was crafting a narrative he never thought he'd share with anyone, a testament to the raw beauty of imperfection. As he reached a climax in his writing, a realization began to settle in the quiet corners of his mind. His story could inspire others to confront their fears and embrace their imperfections, just as he was learning to do. As he penned the final line, he was taken aback by the emotional weight of what he had just accomplished. Strength surged within him, and he knew he was ready to share this transformation with the world. But just as he breathed a sigh of relief, a soft flutter of wings from outside interrupted his thoughts. The chickens had unruly chaos to offer yet again, perhaps a metaphor for the storm brewing inside him about to burst forth. He realized he was on the precipice of something larger than himself, his story intertwining with the world in unpredictable ways. As he gathered the completed sheets, his heart raced at the thought of stepping into this new frontier. Would exposing his truth pave the way for deeper connections, or would it unearth criticisms he feared? Before he could dwell on those doubts, the Coop store creaked open and a presence emerged that sent a shudder through him. His gaze shifted toward the emergence of a figure cloaked in twilight, their silhouette casting an unusual shadow across the yard. He felt a sense of urgency roll through him. The unexpected appearance bore an unspoken weight, hinting at revelations that could reshape everything he had just acknowledged in his writing. This was no simple turn of events. The moment of truth was upon him, and he had to confront whatever loomed within that shadow, an unwelcome challenge testing not only his resolve to share his story, but the very essence of who he was becoming.
The figure drew closer, and as the dim glow of the porch light illuminated their features, Frank could discern the familiar face of his estranged brother, Ethan. The animosity between them had long festered beneath layers of unspoken words and unresolved grievances, transforming into a barrier he thought he'd learned to navigate around. But there Ethan stood, a silhouette carved from old memories, making Frank's heart race with a mixture of dread and curiosity. "Frank," he began, his voice gravelly, almost hesitant, "I didn't expect to find you here." The words hung in the air, laden with discomfort. Frank felt a pulse of irritation. Did Harold always have to intrude, mocking the clarity he had just begun to embrace? "Neither did I," Frank replied, his tone clipped. This was not the reunion he had envisioned after embracing the notion of vulnerability, an unexpected clash of elements in his new narrative, a storm he wasn't prepared to face. "Can we talk?" Ethan implored, shifting his weight as if every moment of hesitation created a chasm between them. An involuntary rush of what could have been surged through Frank. Was this another attempt to reshape their history, or merely a disruption of his newly found resolutions? "What is there to talk about, Ethan?" Frank felt the weight of old wounds resurfacing. "It's been years since you've cared to know." Anger swirled within him alongside confusion, yet there was a sliver of hope that perhaps Ethan bore sentiments worth hearing. "Just listen to me," Ethan pressed, his eyes filled with a sincerity Frank had rarely seen. "I'm here because I need to explain, to reconnect. You can't just erase family." He stepped forward, intent on bridging the distance, but tension electrified the space between them. Frank grappled with the urge to step back, to resist this confrontation that loomed like a dark cloud. As his heart thudded in his chest, the lesson he had just buried in writing echoed in his mind. Vulnerability is a strength. Could this moment be a test of that belief? "I've been doing some thinking," Frank began cautiously. "Writing has shown me a lot about who I am, who I want to be. I thought I was facing my fears, but maybe I was simply avoiding yours." Those last words unraveled something within, making Frank realize that perhaps both brothers had hid behind their own set of walls. Ethan's expression softened, his defenses cracking like the surface of a frozen lake. "I didn't know how to fix things," he finally admitted. "Life got in the way, and when I saw the chickens, I thought of how you used to find solace in them, how we used to argue over who would clean the coop." The mention of their past threw Frank into a whirlpool of nostalgia. Those innocent days when fights ended in laughter, when the world felt small and manageable. An unexpected warmth began to grow, drawing them into a shared space of memory. "So you're here for the chickens?" Frank arched an eyebrow, trying to mask the vulnerability resurfacing within him. Yet, beneath the sarcasm, his heart beat faster at the thought of mending this rift. Ethan chuckled nervously. "No, it's more complicated than that. I've come to take responsibility for—" The words hesitated on his lips, stalling as if they wore heavy armor against the reality behind them. Frank inhaled sharply, his resolve wavered. He realized he was teetering on a pivotal edge between preserving his sense of self through past hurt and the opportunity for healing that lay before him. He needed to know what Ethan carried, and perhaps in confronting the shadows of their estrangement, he could amplify the themes he'd been finding in his writing. "Whatever it is, I'm listening," Frank said, his voice steadier than he felt. The night settled around them, and for the first time in years, the weight of their shared past didn't feel like a burden, but rather a link, a foundation on which they could rebuild. As Ethan slowly revealed the truths he carried, Frank noticed the chickens settling in the background, their gentle clucks a reminder that life carried on in its disordered beauty, much like his own journey. However, as he waited for the revelations that could reshape everything, the magnetic pull of the unknown gripped him again. What awaited him within the layers of Ethan's explanation? Would this rekindle their bond or ignite underlying resentments anew? The shadows of that uncertainty loomed larger, and Frank prepared himself for the unpredictable path ahead, caught between the familiar strain and the hope of profound transformation. As Ethan spoke, the words flowed out like a long-lost river, breaking through the dam of years built from hurt and misunderstanding. He articulated the pain of separation, the shame of absence during moments when family should have stood united. Frank listened, heart thudding beneath the weight of old wounds, but also with something new, a stirring of empathy taking root. "I never meant to walk away from this," Ethan confessed, eyes glistening with emotion. "I thought I was protecting myself, but I was only pushing you away. I realize that now." Each confession felt like a thread loosening in the tangled web of their relationship. Frank's emotions surged, a mix of nostalgia and indignation washed over him. "You think you can just waltz back in after all this time, after abandoning me when I needed support?" Ethan's head dropped, the momentary light in Frank's mind dimming. But beneath that flash of anger, Frank felt another truth rising. The burdens they both carried were etched into their lives, the shared isolation of not knowing how to reconnect, how to heal the rift. "Molly has changed everything for me," Frank admitted, consuming the distance with vulnerability that he had rarely shown. "Writing about our life has revealed how afraid I've been. Not just afraid of loss, but of the hope that lies in risking connection again. I became so rigid, clinging to tradition while fearing anything that seemed different." Ethan looked at him, surprise etched across his features. "Molly's pursuing her dreams, isn't she? Diving into that creativity?" "Yes, and I'm learning that it doesn't have to undermine what we've built. We can tell our stories, our truths, and maybe those truths could bring us closer." With a nervous gulp, Frank forged ahead. The past needed confronting, needed healing. What if I told you that sharing our story could heal more than just the scars we see? What if we embrace each other's imperfections and redefine what family means? Ethan's eyes searched Frank's with a sincerity that could warm an icy heart. "I'd like to try," he murmured, the tentative hope shimmering between them like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside Frank. It felt like shedding weight left unaddressed through years of silence. Their shadows were both burdens and guides, illustrating the lessons life had etched on their hearts. "How about we get back into the chicken coop together?" Frank suggested, a mischievous grin dawning from deep within. "Share those chaotic experiences? Those stories about growing up when everything felt more manageable?" A chuckle erupted from Ethan, breaking the remaining tension. "I'm not sure it's me who's ready to handle the smell of chickens again." "Fair point," Frank replied,
laughter dissolving barriers even further. That if becoming a chicken whisperer is what it takes to mend this relationship, I'm in. In that merging of humor and commitment, the distance that had defined their estrangement began to shrink. The hope lingered in the air, heavy yet captivating, like an invitation waiting to materialize into a vivid reality. As the brothers stood on the threshold of a new beginning, sunlight painted vibrant strokes across the horizon, heralding the promise not just of a new day, but of rekindled connection. Frank felt equipped to navigate whatever awaited them, together. But with each flicker of hopeful light came the urgency of change, and Frank quickly recognized the next step loomed in the unknown. Could they truly open their hearts and share their stories? Could their narratives intertwine and reshape the legacy they both carried? Determined, Frank took a deep breath, standing firm on ground once riddled with uncertainty. "I'm ready," he declared, resolve tightening his voice. "Let's embrace this journey and bring healing into our families through these stories. I want to pave a fresh path together." Ethan nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I'm ready too." The words hung in the air, promising transformation. As they walked side by side, laughter spilling over and stories easing burdens, Frank found himself standing on solid ground. He grasped the profound realizations that had sprouted throughout their encounter. Each step toward the coop was filled with renewed intent.
They would explore the power of vulnerability, reflecting truths about family bonds, chaos, and permanence, as they both grew into men reshaped by their experiences. The upcoming chapters stretched out before them, shimmering with potential, and as Frank captured this moment in his thoughts, a spark of exhilaration rung through him. He was no longer afraid. The veil of uncertainty felt lifted, exposing the enchanting beauty of overcoming their wounds. It was time to chronicle not just their lives, but the lives of those around them, including the hens, the land, and everything that defined them as family. In sharing their story, they would hold space for anyone who felt like a misfit in their own life stories, a shared communion of warmth, chaos, and love. Frank stepped confidently into the light of this new dawn, ready to challenge the boundaries of his understanding, aware that the stories they told could reach far beyond their familial walls. And now, dear friends, as you've journeyed with Frank and Ethan through vulnerability and resilience, it's your turn to support this channel. Subscribe immediately to catch the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm, letting others discover such transformative narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this powerful conclusion about personal growth and connection. True fans of stories that inspire know the importance of joining together in support.